Welcome to Shaping the New York City Skyline, the podcast that explores the stories behind the buildings that shape our city. I'm your host, Brenda Slokowski, and I'm here with my co-host,
David Shamshovich. Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Shaping the New York City Skyline. I'm your host, Brenda Slokowski.
And I'm your other host, David Shamshovich.
And I'm your other host, Camila Almeida, the Three Amigos.
We're back in action. Season 2, Part 2 is rolling along. And
We're in the full swing of Season 2, Part 2.
Oh, yeah.
Full swing.
For sure. And we got some really great guests.
Some heavy hitters.
Yeah. People you're really going to learn from. And they're not just shaping the NYC skyline, but they're shaping the minds and hearts of our Skyliners. James Nelson, who was our guest, he's the principal and head of Tri-State Investment Sales at Avison Young, has 25 years of brokerage experience, including at Massey Knakkel and later at Cushman & Wakefield. And he was a wonderful guest. We love when our Skyliners convert to guests.
Fair enough.
We do.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I love that. But when people who listen to the show, and he's an educator himself. He does his own podcast. He has well over 200 episodes. And wrote this amazing book, The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing.
He's such an engaging speaker with his manageable tidbits and actionable items that allow you to get into the space.
And he's really embraced this whole social media stuff, the podcasting. He does these videos on LinkedIn. He has an Instagram page.
He streams, which that's extremely brave.
But James Nelson was here to impart some wisdom on us, to discuss his book, which is really fantastic. I think you guys, our Skyliners, will really enjoy it.
They're going to love it.
Yep. And so I'm going to do my tagline, which is without further ado,
Woo, woo, woo.
James Nelson from Avison Young.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode of Shaping the NYC Skyline. I feel like we're doing this every week now. We have an amazing guest that we'll get to in a minute, and lots of things going on in the housing world, of course. City of Yes is on the cusp of coming to fruition, and we're not going to reveal the details or our sources, and we'll certainly be discussing that on a future episode, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll bring on some guests that can talk about aspects of it that are really great, and we'll talk about universal affordability preference, which is the replacement to voluntary inclusionary housing, which is Side and Shine's bread and butter, or at least one of it. Plus, with all the office to residential tax incentives, 485X extension, 421A, all that cool stuff, we have lots of things that we'll be busy with, and I'm sure that our next guest will be busy with as well. And now I'm going to introduce him. We're absolutely thrilled, actually, to have James Nelson, the principal and head of Tri-State Investment Sales at Avison Young, where he's led his team to over $5 billion in real estate transactions. He's been named one of the top investment sales brokers in New York by publications like the Commercial Observer and Real Estate Weekly. He's renowned for his ability to build and lead one of the most successful sales teams in the region, and we definitely want to talk about that because there's a lot of interesting things that you're doing with your team. He's a regular contributor to top industry outlets like the New York Real Estate Journal and The Real Deal, where he shares insights on market trends and investment strategies. James is also the author of The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing, which we have on the table here.
An incredible read, guys.
Yeah, and we read through it, and it's a must-read guide for anyone looking to succeed in commercial real estate investment. He's also the host of a popular podcast by the same name, which which episodes I've listened to and have really enjoyed and have learned lots from it. And it's an absolute honor to have you here on the show. Welcome, James.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, you
Amazing.
didn't even know you did all that stuff, right?
Wow.
You were like, I can't believe that this is me, but that's you.
I'm just going to sit here and listen. No, this is fantastic, and it's amazing to be with you all, and thank you for everything that you do. Being a fellow podcast host, I know how much work goes into this, and it's incredible value, and I love the show. I mean, your episodes, the last two that I listened to were with David Schwartz and Jed Resnick, and I learned a tremendous amount. So just thank you for everything that you all are doing.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and
We love the feedback. Guys, give us more feedback.
Yes.
we do. And,
5-star review. Please
That's
share with a friend.
Yeah.
I know how this works.
If it's less than 5 stars, just whisper it in our ear or send an email. You don't have to post that.
No.
Especially if it's less than 3. But it's kudos to you, James. You've done an amazing job. I mean, definitely over 200 episodes, and you just go on every single topic that you could possibly want to hear about in the real estate world, the real estate investment world. Not even that, but just writing a book about the topic. which I read, and a lot of the stuff obviously was very familiar to me from an attorney perspective, because I do a lot of transactions and I understand it. But from an investment perspective, not as much. And it was a very easy read, really, and very understandable. And you have actionable items in there, which I love. I hate when there's ambiguity. So just want to say thank you for that before we dive into to the podcast, and say you're educating the community and you do so much content. So everybody should check it out.
The book, and I've got to thank my writing partner, Rachel Hartman. And look, we sitting, at home mid-2020, we didn't know if it was the end of the world, what was happening. For once, have some free time. So what am I going to do? Write a book. So, because for 20 plus years, people had always asked me, James, what's the book on how you invest in commercial real estate? And I appreciate what you had to say about it being actionable, and that's what I wanted. I want someone, whether you've never encountered real estate, whether you're a veteran, I wanted everybody to kind of read this and say, okay, I understand how this works from start to finish. And I could not agree with you more about the actionable part. You really want specifics that someone says, okay, I know what to do now.
You have definitely, and you break them down into very
easily digestible points.
Exactly.
Steps,
And we're going to get into a lot of that. But before that, I wanted to catch everybody up to speed in case you're not familiar with James and been hidden under a rock for a while. James has more than 2 decades of experience in this field. But how did you get involved in brokerage, and how did you come to live in New York City and then start selling real estate in New York City?
Sure. Well, it was complete luck. I was an English major at Colgate. And my senior spring, all my friends had investment banking jobs. I thought I was going to go out to the West Coast to make movies or something. And then I realized no one was going to pay me to do that. So I started looking around, and there was a posting to be a real estate sales associate that Paul Massey, a Colgate alum, had sent to the Career Service Center. And again, I didn't know anything about real estate. Clearly, the job market was a lot less competitive back then, 25 years ago. But I sent in a resume and made the trip into New York and just had an incredible gut feeling about the place. And they offered me the job.
That's
and
awesome.
It was an amazing time to start. We were still only in one midtown location with 20 people. Of course, then it went on to grow over the next 17 years while I was there. Ultimately, we sold it to Cushman. So it was an incredible ride, and just incredible people that I stay in touch with. Yeah.
And what was your expertise and what was your focus? Maybe it changed over time, but maybe you can give us an understanding of how that either changed and how it started.
Sure. I think the brilliance of the Massey & Ackle platform was that there was this territory system. We focused on sales and represented the owners. And so starting out, I found that was a really great way to learn the business, because I didn't have to learn the whole city. I just focused in on the Chelsea neighborhood, and I literally went, this was before, obviously, Google Earth, and, would go through, take a photo of every single property, take down the owner information. It's amazing how much of that sticks with you over time. And learned every single sale, who's buying, who's selling, who are the new tenants, what's going on with zoning. And I think what you find is, even after 90 days of really intense study, I knew more about that neighborhood than 99% of the investors and brokers out there. So, and I talk about this in the book, because whether you're going to be a broker, an investor, a really successful law firm, you want to specialize, right? Generalists, it just doesn't work, right? If you really want to be successful, you have to have that specialty. In fact, I was sitting with a group of some of our team members this morning, and I was asking them, as we went around the table, I said, what is it that you specifically bring to the group? What do you know how to do better than anyone else in this room? And, let's put ego, feel free to really speak to that and take ownership of it. And I think also, if you want to be a successful investor, having that thesis and really studying it is what will also help lead to success.
There's an aspect that you've brought to your sales team, which is a bit different from what other brokerage places would be doing, which is kind of getting rid of the competition and really making a team-based, and also then taking out the territory aspect of it and putting in the asset class of it. How did that come to you? Why did you think it was going to be successful, and why did it ultimately pay off?
Sure. So I think at the time, the territory system was absolutely the right approach in New York City. 20, 25 years ago, investors would really just focus in a neighborhood. They wanted to buy in a neighborhood. Maybe they expand a little bit. but that's where they were interested. And over time, what you found is that investors would start to kind of broaden geographically. They'd start looking all over the city, not just Manhattan, certainly the boroughs. And then we also found, and maybe this was always the case, but the different asset classes are so specialized. I mean, think about multifamily in New York City and how complex rent regulation is, right? Or even, talk about development, and we're going to get into a little bit of that. Everything as far as the bonuses that take place, the tax abatements, it's really difficult. Again, talking about specializing, it's really hard to be an expert at everything. So we really thought that having asset class specialists who really knew all the ins and outs and would cover the city would really be in the best interest of not only the clients, but investors who are calling in saying, look, I'm looking to buy in multifamily. What do you have across the city? As far as how we built out the team, and I've got great partners in Erica Dean and Brandon Polikoff who helped build out the group, is that we wanted one unified sales team. So the traditional brokerage model, which probably exists at pretty much every single firm out there, is that you have brokers who are, many places certainly collaborative, but they have their own book of business, right? They have their own P&L. And look, they're salespeople. You want to incentivize them, right? So to go out and bring in your own business, right? But then what happens is if you're just focused on your book of business, you're not focused on what the person's doing, across the cube from you. And you're not benefiting from helping each other out on that.
The client's not benefiting either.
No, and I think worse, there are some firms out there that brokers will actually compete with each other internally for the same assignment.
Yeah,
I don't know how that works. What I wanted to do is create one unified sales team that covers the whole city as a group. And so we meet every single morning. We go around the room. It's one investor database. Everyone shares information, and you really are getting the benefit of our sales team, whether you're looking to buy or sell.
And do you do these meetings by asset class, or is everybody in the room and then you just discuss asset class by asset class?
Yeah, we Mondays are multifamily, Tuesday retail, and so forth.
It's like Taco Tuesdays. But
Yes.
Retail Tuesdays.
So even though if someone's not specializing in retail, I think it's helpful for them to hear what's going on. Maybe they're working on a multifamily deal that's mixed use that has retail at the base. And then also, I'm sure you've seen this with your clients over the last couple of years. You have investors who are saying, you know what? I'm not liking this whole multifamily, situation anymore. I'm going to go try and do retail, or office is a little challenging right now. Maybe I'm going to jump into multifamily. So it does help when there can be introductions made amongst the group as well.
It sounds like it's a seamless transition if you're working within the same group.
For sure. Yeah, everybody has access to all the same information. You come in day one with us, and you're automatically tapped into all the transactions, right? And so we don't want someone who just says, oh, well, I can kick back and I can, just participate in these fees that are happening. Yeah. We actually do a 360 review of everyone twice a year anonymously. There's comments as far as suggestions for growth, as well as things that they're doing well. And so, we want to make sure that everybody is performing. But I think the brokers love the fact that they've got, their specialty. They know kind of the structure, the organization chart, and they know also what the compensation is. Compensation is really important. And so our comp structure with the brokers is a little complex, and there's different buckets of compensation. But everybody knows what they're going to get on every single transaction based on what they do. And that way, I don't know if you all hear stories of brokers arguing about fees. Like, that doesn't happen with us.
No, that's. I think it's a great idea, because you have 4 asset classes, but how many areas of the city do you have? Whereas when you started, Manhattan really was it. Mm-hmm. Now people are expanding to all 5 boroughs, right?
Yeah.
Everything's now up for grabs.
For sure.
So just turning back to your experience, you stayed on with Mason Nackle when it was acquired by Cushman.
We were selling 4 times the amount of properties as the next brokerage firm. Just like, think about that in a city this competitive where there's like dozens and dozens of brokerage firms. So, that was an amazing run, but we kind of took it as far as we could have gone. How much more? We were going to sell 5 times as much as everyone else. So, we're starting to think, okay, do we go to other, cities? Do we do other, do we become truly full service? And it really made more sense to just at that point, end up selling to a global full-service platform. And so had some great years at Cushman, and I saw the benefits really for our clients. Again, what is the best decision for our clients? And so having that global full service was helpful. So when Avison Young came to me, it was really the opportunity, I guess, to answer your question, to build something, blank canvas. And again, this idea of a unified sales team that covers the city as one team, you can't really do that in a legacy firm. And there was a lot of incredible brokers, who remain there today at Cushman. But this was an opportunity to really build this out from the ground up. And Avison Young, which is a privately held company, so I'm one of 750 owners of the company. So I love that private, having a seat at the table. But it's also, we also have 120 offices around the world, and we're global and we're full service, and that's really helpful to our clients. So I really, when I talk about Avison Young, I really say it's the best of both worlds between the Massey Knakkel and Cushman.
No, it makes sense. Sometimes it's easier to do that when you're building something from the ground up versus trying to fix something where you are. So I completely understand that feeling. Turning back to your early days, when do you think that light bulb hit that for you, I'm good at this and I have an actual future here? How did you figure that out?
Yeah. And before I went off on my own, if you will, as a full-time salesperson, I was a sales associate working with Bob Knakkel. And I mean, to sit next to him and listen, I mean, that was better than an MBA.
Yeah.
So I had the roadmap, the thrill of getting the listing, but the closing and obviously the commission check that came along with it. I mean, I was hooked pretty early for sure. Why here I am 25 years later, still loving it, and every single day I'm learning something new. I do think you need to be wired the right way to do this. I mean, brokerage is sales for sure, and so there is a lot of disappointment. I used to get all worked up because these deals go left, right, sideways, they die. And I've seen over the years some brokers on the floor get really worked up and really angry, and I'm just kind of, hey, that's just part of the drill, right? And so I remember early on we had Barbara Corcoran come speak to Massey Knakkel, amazing, and someone asked her the question, Barbara, what is the key to a successful broker? You've seen so many brokers over the years. Well, what is it? And she said it's how they handle failure, and I really like that answer. Yeah. Because, and hopefully that's, when, not that I want to fail, but when disappointment happens, it's like, okay, what's next? Like, how do we learn from this? How do we move on? Where's the solution? I'm not someone who dwells in the problems. I'm in the solution business, as I know you all are as well. Yeah. So I think that's just a big part of it, because if you're someone who, has a hard time kind of getting over defeat, or rejection, brokerage is probably not the right job for you.
Yeah, I think brokerage definitely, and in life in general, I think you dealing with failure is important, because if you're thinking about the past failures and what I coulda, shoulda, versus trying to either get out of the situation or coming up with something new, it's not gonna benefit you. You're just gonna be stuck in the past. So I think learning from it is a great thing, and then moving on and applying that to future transactions. And I love that perspective that you have, because I think you're right. Brokers have a lot of disappointment, way more than lawyers. I mean, we have plenty of disappointment, but
you do get paid by the hour, though.
If we get paid.
How do you match your investors with your specific property? What are you looking for to balance that, human connection, but also the investment connection?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think early on, you just, if you only have a couple buildings to sell, everything's a great investment, right? Yeah. And you're just, you should buy this. Why? But at this point, we probably have close to 100 exclusive listings. But when you call me and we start talking about, okay, what are you looking for? What are your objectives? And sure, we start with the asset class and geography and business plan. Do you want to be passive? Do you want to be active? Once we've kind of established what you're looking for, then the good broker should be able to kind of think that whole list and say, these are the 3 things that you should focus on, right? And so I think it's really kind of drilling down on that and really trying to solve for what you're looking for. I think another big part of a successful sales process or legal process is just mapping out the issues up front. So I'm a big believer, if there's an issue or a problem with the paperwork on the regulation, whatever it is, we're going to just tell you that up front. And you might say, well, what? You're killing the deal. But the buyer's going to find out anyways down the road, right? And I'm sure you've had plenty of situations where you're working on a deal and, you want to be nice and say that someone wasn't trying to cover something up, but maybe they could have been a little more forthright, and it just ends up wasting everybody's time, right? Whereas if you just cover it up front, then it's like, okay, well, it's part of the deal. And either that works for you or it doesn't, because if you can't deal with that, then like, let's go move on to the next.
Yeah.
I like that approach, actually. It's very like fact-based driven, and it kind of shows you like, here's all the information up front. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll find something else.
Not only that, but you have more time to think about a possible solution for that issue.
And hiding it is not good, because you say you're wasting time, and I appreciate it more when someone tells me up front, because then you have a buyer who says, okay, there are DHCR registration issues. There are tenants here that I want out. You can't make it vacant for me. I know going in that that's going to be the case.
Right.
I'm going to have a different negotiation strategy, and you're not going to be wasting time negotiating around that.
That's right.
And another thing, one of the things that you talk about a lot in the book, and a lot, I think, in your articles, is credibility. And I think it goes to credibility. And one of the things, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that and the importance of credibility, because there are a lot of people that work in real estate in New York City, but it's still a very tight-knit group, meaning a lot of people know each other. And you don't want to go in as a buyer and look for a property and then either not have the capital or not have the smarts or the right people behind you to get it done. So maybe you could just discuss a little bit about that credibility, and maybe that goes to what you were saying earlier, which is, I'm going to tell you straight up, this building has X and Y issues. And if you're willing to go, let's continue. Let's go on to a term sheet. So maybe we just want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Your reputation is everything. I mean, that's why your clients come to you, right? Because they know that you're going to give them the right advice that's really in their best interest. It's not, again, so you have to really have that perspective. And I think for all parties in the transaction, I mean, reputation's everything. I mean, there's a lot of, whether it's buyers who think at the last minute they're going to be able to retrade or, try to, and sure, of course, there's always, negotiations. I'm saying, but at the right time, but when you agree to something and then go back on it, for the next one, and they think that they're getting us, and maybe if we're in a tight spot and we do have to accept, something after the fact, sure, maybe they get away with it on that one trade. But when they show up the next time, the first thing that we're going to tell our client is, hey, just so you know, this buyer last time said they were going to close in 60 days, and they dragged it out past 120 days and, came up with all these, ridiculous issues at the closing and asked for this credit. So, whatever price you want to land at, just make sure you tack on, whatever it is. So because then the buyer will think that they're kind of coming over, but we've already kind of factored in that there's going to be that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that happens like a couple % of the time, if that. I think real estate professionals get kind of a bad rap, and I think that's really the exception. I mean, most people we deal with are so professional, and they don't want to waste time either, right?
Yeah, but it's important to think about the retrades you're making after you've already committed to something, because they will remember you, and then the price will increase, or if there are multiple offers, even if yours is the highest, they may not accept it. One of the basics you talk about in the book are the 4 asset classes, which are, multifamily, office, retail, and then, land, development land. What is transpiring today? Multifamily hasn't been doing so well because of the 2019 rent laws, right? So the income's not great, expenses are up, but some people are seeing lots of opportunity, actually. So I'm seeing kind of both sides of the thing. Lease, offices, not great, but actually you've come out with a few articles recently that said, no, actually New York is doing much better than most places. And actually things are coming up with a lot of people going back to work. Development was obviously at a standstill because you didn't have a replacement for 421A. That's come back, but people are not still sure about how effective it is. Plus now you have the City of Yes, which we spoke about, which is going to revamp zoning, take away some red tape, hopefully, and then provide some bonuses in areas for affordable housing where you wouldn't have them before. What's going on with these different asset classes today?
Sure. And first of all, apologies to the industrial owners. That was out of the critique that I received in my book. That was James. How did you forget about industrial?
You know what? I didn't even think about it myself.
No, I mean, and when you look across the country, industrial a couple of years ago was the number one selling asset class. It actually eclipsed multifamily. It's just, again, kind of my career has mostly been focused in New York City, and we do handle the occasional industrial deal, but there's so little of it. But yeah, multifamily, and again, this is what we talked about before with how specific it is. So are we talking about rent regulation? Are we talking about 421A, which of course is stabilized by definition, or fair market? And how are each of those performing? Now we have, as of course from the New York State housing package, we have good cause eviction, which now affects, as you know, fair market housing that was built before 2009. So you have several different categories of multifamily. I mean, what I would say is if you had a truly fair market building that was built 2009, and it's rare because a lot of them are still done on 421As. There's huge potential there because the rents right now, the vacancy rate's 1.4%. And so rents are going up at a tremendous level. I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about, how rent regulation and what happened in 2019. You can't get increases anymore except whatever the RGB gives you every year. Investors are saying, I'm going to need, a 7.5%, 8% return because that's all I'm getting. And in some cases, I don't have upside, I have downside, because it's not like they're capping my expenses. So, the yields on regulated went up dramatically. But fair market has been, really desirable because we still have a huge housing shortage. And it's still the safest investment opportunity in many cases. You have a 100-unit building and you lose one tenant, you don't lose your whole rent roll. And the financing is the leverage is conservative out there, but the agency debt today is very attractive. So I'm pretty optimistic actually about multifamily. Next on the list, office. Again, so specific to what and where. I was just meeting with one of the biggest office owners in the city and just talking about, their trophy in A space is renting incredible rents. Our data is that 75% of the leasing activity has occurred at the top 25% of the buildings, so the Class A and trophy. There's also some incredible sales that have taken place where end users have stepped up and bought their own office buildings. So that's encouraging that companies are, sure, they're taking advantage of the market and pricing, but they want to really establish permanent roots here. So, but look, and I talk about it in the book, office is a really capital intensive business. So unless if you've got the wherewithal, the base building work, the TI, the downtime, the commissions, in some of these 10-year leases that we're doing now, it might be 3+ years before you see, rent. Yeah. So it's, but that being said, there are some tremendous discounts that we're seeing today where office is trading in, 20-30% of maybe where it was at peak.
Can you just explain the difference between A and the two other classes? Mm-hmm. And then I assume you're just referring right now to Class A, which is doing obviously much better, but the Class B and C, which are, I guess people are buying more, from what I understand, to do potential conversions to residential. Yeah,
that's the hope. A is a full service building. We do even bifurcate that with trophy. B is still full service, but not the same caliber of building. And then C, you don't have the services, and so it's. The B and C buildings both alike, like that mid-block stuff, there's a lot of it. It's really challenging because if you're a landlord and you're looking at the rent. So if what happened after COVID and, hybrid work and now the vacancy rate in the city is 20%, that's 100 million square feet of available space. So tenants are trading up, right? And so you want to lease that, antiquated building. It's not just that the rent is cheap, but then you think about you still have to spend the money to get a tenant in there. And so in many cases, it just makes it really obsolete. So that's why clearly, there's such a big discussion and focus now on the office to resi conversion. So, we've got 100 million square feet of available office, but we have a need for 500,000 housing units. So, look, and I know you'll get to it in your future shows on City of Yes. What I've heard is that even raising, I don't know if this was the city or Rebney's data, of moving the vintage of building to convert from 63 to 91 frees up like another 125 million square feet of office that could be converted. Now we know, and the challenge is it's got to have the right zoning, it's got the right footprint. We can get into 467M. We think that's going to be a good thing. Yep. But I think we are going to see a lot more conversions. But I can't forget about, I want to talk about retail and development as well. Retail has been phenomenal. In many cases, the vacancy rate is now tighter than it was even before COVID. So that's been incredible to see that a lot of these retail quarters have filled back up.
So obviously, what's the reason for that change?
It's really the rent. I mean, if you think about it, look at Broadway and Soho, right? I mean, it was at one point, maybe it was 10 years ago, it was like a $200 rent market. And then, 5 years ago, that went up to $1,000 a foot at peak, right? Then COVID hits and then tremendous vacancy. Rents crash back down to $150 a foot, and it's cheap. So then, space starts filling back up again, right? And now we're kind of back in that $300 to $400 a foot range. Obviously, very specific to the size of the space, the block. I mean, could even be higher than that, but it's really just pricing. And so that certainly helped, because the tenant demand was there. Food and beverage has also been incredible, so certainly see that helping in the neighborhoods. And, for an investor, I love the thesis because with rates going up and cap rate expansion, if you can go get a 6 or 7% return from retail on a lease that was done right after COVID where there's upside in that rent, I mean, get that 6, 7% return and then get the upside potential from that future rent increase. So I think retail is super exciting. The last piece is development. If we're just talking about on the residential side, that's really the only place where you're seeing development. I don't think,
Right.
there are very few, speculative office these days. But, rental, we're waiting to really see what 485X does, right? I mean, developers are running their numbers. You all know, I see if you got your map back there. It's zone A, B. I mean, we got the whole thing mapped. This is like the war room here. So, but the in a lot of discussions is, are you building under 99 units? What does it look like, 100 to 149? So everyone's trying to figure out increased labor costs. They're all solving for what can I pay for the land, right? They're trying to back into the return. So, when developers say, well, hey, if I'm going to build over 150 units, I think I can only pay in the mid 200s a buildable. Well, that's great, but who's selling land in the mid 200s a buildable, right? So if no one's selling that land, then nothing's going to get built. So that's what's happening right now is everyone is trying to figure this out, like where does it make sense? And we'll find out if this program worked or not. Meanwhile, condo has been incredible as long as it's in the right location. I mean, some of these sellouts on the Upper East Side, over $4,000 a foot, amazing, but it's very specific to, that location.
Domino, I just saw the Two Trees did some of the top contracts in the Domino area. So I mean, I think condo it's only in specific areas, and you don't really get 485X for condo. Yeah, except under specific.
But the inventory is tightening up. I think 2-3 years from now, everyone's going to look around and say, "Hey, where's all the new condo product?" But it's difficult it's expensive to finance for sure, and to raise equity. Yeah. A lot of the equity today is saying, well, hey, why do I want to take development risk? I mean, everybody's a lender today, Well, why do I want to put equity in a deal when I can put out mezz and get like a high teens return? So that's part of the challenge is these developers who are trying to raise the capital to do it. Because I think, the pricing's there for the end product.
What are you seeing? Are lenders more willing? Are they more open? Mm-hmm. Because previously it was very hard to get from an actual bank, from an actual lender versus like a debt fund. We were having lots of trouble in the last couple of years. Yeah,
it really depends on the asset class, the sponsor for sure, and the business plan. So, I mean, Scott Singer, who leads our debt equity group at Avison Young, I mean, he's really dialed into this. But yeah, there's a lot of different capital sources that are out there today. And it's, I think overall, for the most part, certainly with cash flowing assets, I mean, we're not seeing the loan to values that we used to see. I mean, I think the leverage is more conservative, and certainly for the community banks and the multifamily space, rent regulated, I mean, unfortunately, they have, and it was Signature gone, New York Community Bank trying to, sort out their challenges, and the rest of these community banks with a lot of scrutiny. It's tough for them to lend unless if that loan to value is very conservative. So, that being said, obviously we got a rate cut. That's great. The spreads are tightening too. That helps. CMBS has been amazing. We're seeing a lot more CMBS issuance. I mean, that's again really more for the stabilized cash flowing deals, but that could really help fill the void. But the big challenge / opportunity here is, at some point I should probably figure out what the exact percentage of sales that we are handling that are driven by maturity defaults or loan maturities rather, very high, where we're getting the call from the borrower saying, okay, my loan is maturing in 6 months and, the lender's telling me that I have to pay down this loan by $10 million and either I don't want to or they're not telling us, but they don't have the ability to do that. They have equity in the deal, right? So what we're seeing is just a massive deleveraging that's taking place. So it's going to force a lot of sale opportunities. And so that's why I think the next couple of years, I think we're going to see, the sales volume the last 2 years, everybody's been on, a lot of buyers, sellers have been on the sidelines. So sales volume in New York City across the major asset classes has only been a third of the 10-year average. Wow. So you have a lot of, buyers are saying, well, hey, rates are going up. There's going to be more distress. I'm not going to jump in now. Sellers are saying, why would I ever want to sell into this? But now the rate cut, and I wrote a white paper on the psychology of the market. 50 bips, it's amazing. But when you look at the actual, what that does, the cap rates and the actual economics, like that alone, is not going to, completely right the ship. But I think what it will do is it will get a lot of buyers and sellers off the sidelines because buyers are now going to say, oh no, I missed the bottom of the market. We're on the way back up. I better jump in now. And sellers are going to say, hey, maybe now the wind's a little bit at my back and it's okay to sell now.
No, I think that's a very good point. And another point that you brought up, which is some people are going to be selling because of their loans are maturing. They don't want to pay it back. And so they'd rather just sell it. And that creates an opportunity. It creates an opportunity to capitalize on that need. Another thing that you talk about in the book, which is the reason behind a sale, whether it's fighting between the members or investors or because they have to sell because the loan's going into maturity. Now, it's funny, I've always had that intuition. There's like, why don't you ask them? I wonder why you're selling it. If this is such a good investment, why are you selling it? And I just, for some reason, was either concerned about asking that question, but you in your book actually encourage that question. How often does it come up where somebody asks that? Because I think it's a very good point, right? Because then you know what their motivation is, assuming they're telling the truth.
Yeah, surprisingly not that often that the buyer asks, well, why is the seller selling? Now, a broker who's doing their job, if your client's in financial distress, you're not exactly going to volunteer that.
Yeah,
if it's an estate sale, they'll probably be very quick to say, it's an estate sale, this is what it is. But I think knowing the reason on why or why they need to sell and why they're committed to selling, do they have the ability to sell into the market? So the first thing we do when an owner calls us to value their property is first thing we do is look at how much debt they have on the property. And we're going to eyeball it. And if we think that it's close or if they're underwater, say, look, we'd love to help you out, but we don't think we can get you out from under. It's so much better to have that conversation to get up front. Yeah. And maybe it's having a transparent process with the lender. I also wrote a white paper on why short sales are better than note sales. And I think if you can get the lender on board to say, look, this is better for the asset to have a traditional marketing process where we're not like signaling to the world that this is under distress, because once you're selling a loan or there's a default, then the vultures start circling. But that way it's like, look, we'd like to try to recoup some equity for our client, but if we can't, then you've got all the bids, right? And then you can decide what you want to do. So in many of those cases, those end up becoming short sales.
Yeah. So, that's a good point, which is if you're in trouble, you want to tell the lender, because the lender wants to get paid at the end of the day. They'd rather not go through foreclosure. It's a long process. Right. It's costly. And they may be willing to take a little bit of a hit on their principal as long as they get paid something and they can get out of that investment. So I think it's a good point for people to understand, because it's not one that's terribly obvious. It's like, go to the lender, try to negotiate something, and see what you can do instead of putting in default. Because like I said, once you're in default, the reason behind the sale is very clear, and it's a fire sale, right? So you're going to get bottom dollar prices. Mm-hmm. So you were doing the brokerage thing. You knew nothing about real estate. And then you decided, you know what? I'm not just going to sell it to other people. I'm actually going to go and buy property. I'm going to be part of an investment group. I'm going to be a limited partner, maybe a general partner. I'm not sure. But how did that transition happen? When did it happen? And what types of investing do you do?
So the first investment I ever made was really, I don't want to say by accident, but I'd met someone through NYU, this emerging developer, and he had tied up this property in the West Village, and he said, my plan is to do a condo conversion, which at the time, for a 5-story walk-up, there weren't a lot of those. I mean, it happened to be in a really good location. But he said, James, I think I got a really good deal on this contract. I bought it off market. Can you go flip the contract? So after 2 weeks, I had offers of over, $500,000-$600,000 just to sell the contract. And he said, James, I appreciate your help on this, but this is such a great deal. I'm just going to do it myself. And so I don't know what prompted me. I said, well, hey, are you taking investors? Maybe I should get in on this. He says, well, actually, I am. And that was Matt Blesso Properties. I went on to do probably at least a half a dozen or more investments with him and saw the benefits, and really mostly as a limited partner. And ultimately, what I wanted to do was really scale that. And that's when I brought the idea to my partners at Massey & Ackle, look, we should raise a fund to go do this, to go invest put out JV equity for value-add deals. And so we partnered with River Oak and Steve DiNardo, still remain very close with them. Because what we found is that for a lot of these sponsors, it's tougher to get a $2 to $5 million check than it is maybe even to get a $50 million check.
Yeah.
So we raised $50 million. We went out and invested in a variety of different deals, which was a great way to participate in the market. But I think also as a broker, you have to do it in the right way. So I'm so conscientious of conflict.
Yeah.
So first of all, if anyone ever calls me and says, James, I want to sell my property, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is a nice property, I should buy it, right? It's like, how can I get you the most money for your property?
Yeah.
That is my job. Now, if another broker is representing that property, that's fair game to me because that seller has representation. Right. That's fair game. But even then, I mean, I got a full-time job. I have GP'd a couple projects, but it's much better for me to bring on an operating partner who can do that. And so definitely do more on the LP side. But even with that, like if I have anything to do with the brokerage, I'm not investing in it. And that's just, I think, the best way. But I enjoy, and you ask about what do I look to invest in, I invest all over the country, certainly some deals here in New York. It's really sponsor driven. That's the most important thing for me. I'm invested in an RV deal right now, which, I would never even think. I mean, the business plan, when it was explained to me, made a lot of sense. But this is a sponsor who's got 20 plus years experience, has done all kinds of, great things in, multifamily, self-storage. The business plan made sense to me, but it was really having confidence that I knew the sponsor could deliver on it.
Yeah, because you were working with somebody who had a track record. In the book, you say, build a good team.
Right.
And one of the first things you say is find a good lawyer, which is...
There you go.
I mean, I'm particularly... This is where my conflict of interest is because I'm one of those lawyers. You also talk about having a general contractor, somebody who can deliver, because we know that if you're not delivering on time, that can be money and that can be a big problem. Others who you may want to walk through with the property, an accountant, a property manager, all those folks that you need. So maybe in a nutshell, you can kind of just give our Skyliners, since I haven't said that word today, a little brief overview of what the novice would do to bring in some credibility and to be able to actually close on a deal where they haven't done so before.
I think for that first deal or two, finding a great partner is really important. Your value add is you find the opportunity. It starts with a deal. You find the opportunity, and if you have a skill set, you can package it all together and really make it work, right? That's your value add. But then the partner you're bringing in, they've got the team to execute on it, right? And they have the credibility. And you should still look to build your investor network, but then you're also raising money based on your partner's track record, right? Whereas, you might have, the proverbial friends and family who are like, yeah, I know you're smart, I know what you're doing, but I haven't seen you make an investment before. You haven't done this 10 times. This is still a lot of money. And so I think, if you can point to the partner to say, well, here's their track record, this shows you they have the expertise in house to do it. Like, that's really, I think, the best way to learn. And I think along with that comes a lot of the professionals. But I think it's important to certainly develop your own network as well, right? And we've talked about the importance of specialization. So it's not like just go to a generalist attorney, right? If it's a landlord-tenant matter, you want to go to a landlord-tenant attorney, et cetera.
One of the quotes that I liked from your book was, you say, create value where others see obstacles. And it feels like almost every transaction I'm working on now, not everyone, has some kind of obstacles. What kind of good examples have you seen of that, and then potential solutions that you've seen?
So first of all, risk tolerance, because that's really important to assess, because we don't always have all the answers, or we know there's exposure, but we don't know how much, and we don't know what's going to unfold. So, you can try to box around that in the right contract, although, what sellers are handing out representations these days. So, I think you need to first assess kind of, if you're looking, not that any of these investments are risk-free, but if you're looking for something more passive and predictable, then, maybe there's one track of investment, right? But as far as, when you deal with these tenant matters where, the best you can do is, you got to have your base case assumption, and then you can have your best case for sure, but you have to, know that even if whatever doesn't work, that you can at least get by. And I recently heard Peter Hungerford on a podcast, and I liked what he had to say about just, I need to make sure that everything that's under my control, I'm going to execute to the best of my ability. Because people talk about, well, maybe we'll get another rate cut, and then cap rates will tighten, but
who knows?
Who knows, right? So I think it's really having the expertise, making sure you're on top of the issues. And I think the creativity is, that's where, seeing something that maybe the owner does not. And as a broker, we're pretty good at usually trying to, we want to try to sell the upside. But I talked about in my book, Margaret Stryker, really smart investor. She made a bid on this, this couple mixed-use properties down in Greenwich Village. And I said, Margaret, what are you going to do with this? This isn't your typical kind of deal. Like, what's the plan here? And she found out that she could actually build a carriage house, like a nice sized property in the backyard. And I didn't even realize that. I was like, wow, that's good.
Yeah. so knowledge is power. My mom was right.
It is.
Knowledge is power for sure. So, and that's the thing. It's like, what's the highest and best use? What is the way, what's your business plan where you can approach something and have an advantage? Like this is a very basic investment thesis, but a good one is, retail, when it's vacant, right? It sells at a discount. It's difficult to finance, right? But if you have that tenant relationship and you can bring a tenant to the table and buy it at the same time, you're creating value immediately. That's how Jeff Sutton became a billionaire, right? First it started with Payless and then Walgreens, so that, having that advantage, like that's what I talk about is the insider's edge. What is your edge?
James, you've been an absolute wonderful guest sharing this information. And not only that, but you do this day in and day out. You have some amazing videos on LinkedIn. You also have a blog. You just write articles. You're everywhere. So maybe you want to tell people where they can find you and where they can see you perhaps live if you're doing some sort of presentations or speeches.
Oh, I appreciate that. I built jamesnelson.com. The site's not about me. It's really about for investors. That's where you can find out about the book, the podcast, all the show notes, articles. I write weekly for Forbes, so we put the articles there as well. So there's a lot of content.
Yeah.
So that's a great place. We're also very active on social media at James Nelson NYC. That's on Instagram, and LinkedIn is really, I think, the most powerful platform for what we're doing.
And then your podcast, you have several hundred episodes. So check out the backlog. I definitely will, because I learned a ton from it. But how often are you releasing new episodes on that?
I try weekly.
Wow.
Oh,
Challenging,
wow.
but it's
unbelievable.
Yes.
And the book is called The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing. I highly recommend it. I read through it. I'm sure I'll read through it again. And it was a great read. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your
Thank you so
wisdom.
much
This
for
was a lot of
coming.
fun.
For
Thank you,
coming.
everybody.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave comments, because we love to hear from our audience, right, Brenda?
Yeah, feel free to reach out at info@sideandshine.com or visit our website at sideandshine.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
You could also reach out to David and Brenda at dshamshovich@sideandshine.com and bslakowski at sideandshine.com.
Those are lengthy last names. You can just find us on our website.
That's right.